So in the last lecture, we finally used the token to get access to protected resources. Now I want to make sure that we can see in our UI, in the app, whether we are authenticated or not. Right now we always see authenticate here, which leads us to the authentication forum. But even if we do log in successfully here, we still see authenticate here. Would be better to see log out here if we did authenticate so that we can see, hey, we are authenticated. Of course, you might also show something like user to access your profile. I'll just stick to logout though. So this would be a great addition to our application, and it is easy to implement. We manage what we see in the navigation area here in the components folder under navigation items. In this component, we define what's inside our menu, both the responsive one and this desktop navigation. Now, the idea is to only show navigation item with authenticate on it if you are unauthenticated, so if you do need to sign up or sign in, and show a logout link instead if you are logged in. So for that, we need to check our state, our login state in navigation items. Navigation items, of course, is a presentational component, so we can't connect this to Redux. Well, we could turn this into a class-based component and use connect on this component or use the useState hook. You can do that, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. This breaks the idea of having a few container components which are connected to the store and having a lot of dump components which don't know about the store. So I wouldn't recommend using that approach. A better approach would be to pick a fitting container which actually loads navigation items. And here it's not in the container folder but in the layout folder, simply because we use it to wrap our components. The layout.js file is a class-based component, and there we implement the toolbar and the side drawer, which are of course the components which use navigation items in the end. So it would make sense to connect the layout here to our store so that we can pass the auth information down to toolbar and side drawer, which then in turn could pass it to navigation items. This is exactly what I want to do. So I'll import connect from React Redux here, and I will connect my layout. Now I'm interested in some state, so I'll add the map state to props constant here. This will be a function where I receive the state as always, and I return a JavaScript object where I do map some props to slices of my state. And I want to create a property which I'll name is authenticated, and I'll bind it to state. And now how can we find out if the user is authenticated? In the end, if we have a look at our auth reducer, we see that in the state we have relevant to authentication. If the token is null, the user is unauthenticated. If the token is not null, the user is authenticated. That's especially true since we clear the token automatically once it expires. That's the code we added earlier. So we can rely on the token giving us an indication about whether the user is authenticated or not. With that in mind, we can go back to layout and simply set is authenticated equal to state of token and compare it to null. If it's not equal to null, what this check checks, then is authenticated is true because we are authenticated. Now I'll use that together with connect, so I'll pass this to connect and wrap the layout component with the function returned by the connect function. And now I can use is authenticated as a prop in my JSX code here, or anywhere in this component of course. And I want to pass it to my toolbar. So I'll add a new prop here, and I'll name this is auth, for example, and I will pass this props is authenticated. So this property we just mapped down there. And I'll do the same for the side drawer. Now, of course, I need to edit these two components to be able to use that new prop. So I'll go to the toolbar component here, and there I now receive that new prop information, and I need to pass it to navigation items. Here I'll name this prop is authenticated, and I'm switching up these names just to make sure you're not confusing what's coming in and what we're passing on. So here is authenticated will be passed to navigation items as a prop, and we pass on props is auth. Is auth because that is what we just picked in the layout, is auth. The same for the site drawer, of course. In the site drawer, there we also have the navigation items, and I bind is authenticated, so the prop name I just chose in the toolbar, and I pass on props is auth. With that, I save both components, and now in the navigation items, I know that I receive this is authenticated prop, which is true or false. So now here I can simply render this navigation item conditionally. I can do this inline or separate. I'll do it inline, and I'll simply check if the props which I receive here, so add them as an argument, if props is authenticated, that's of course that prop we just defined in the site drawer and the toolbar. If is authenticated is true, then I want to render this navigation item. I'll split this over multiple lines to make it a bit easier to read. The alternative is to render a navigation item where I actually link to /logout and where I say logout. Now /logout leads to a route we haven't registered yet, but that's the logic I want to use. Let's save this, and we can actually see this logout button here in the menu, though right now it's incorrect. It's showing logout when we're not authenticated, because we are not authenticated when the app reloads. So let's quickly check the logic in the layout container. Is authenticated is bound to state auth token, which is null initially. So that is correct, but in navigation items I have a logical error. If I'm authenticated, then of course I don't want to show authenticate but logout. So I will check the opposite. If I'm not authenticated by adding an exclamation mark, then I show authenticate, otherwise the logout. In this order it makes sense. So now let's save this file again. And now if this app reloads, you see authenticate is the default. Now if we do log in though, so switch to sign in and submit, you see it gets exchanged for logout. So now we update the UI. In the next lecture, we'll make sure that when we click logout, we actually do something, because right now this route doesn't exist.